Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents A Night in the Pech Valley, a memoir of a member of the 75th Ranger Regiment in the global war on terrorism, by Grant McGarry, narrated by Corey M. Snow. Dedication. Specialist Christopher Shane Wright. Died August 19, 2010. Operation Enduring Freedom. One for the airborne ranger in the sky. Greater love hath no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends. John chapter 15, verse 13. Prologue. When I returned home from my fifth and final deployment in October 2010, I didn't sleep much. In fact, I went a straight week without sleep. I spent most of my days, and especially nights, drowning in survivor's guilt. When I finally did start getting some sleep, the dreams were so vivid and real that I almost didn't want to fall asleep. The survivor's guilt got worse. It almost crushed me. In December 2010, as I was preparing to get out of the Army the following month, I went to my parents' house for the holidays. For Christmas, my mom got me a journal. She knew I was going through hard times and thought it would be good for me to put my nightmares into words and onto paper. Turns out, it was exactly what I needed to do. Throughout 2011, while I was working at the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad as a personal security specialist, I wrote in that journal about anything and everything that happened while I was in the Army. I wrote about what compelled me to join the military in 2006 and everything that happened up to January 9, 2011. My last day as a Ranger in 2nd Platoon Charlie Company, 1st Ranger Battalion, 75th Ranger Regiment. I never planned to do anything with the stories because, after all, I was a quiet professional. So, when I got back stateside from Iraq for Christmas in 2011, I tucked the journal away in my nightstand. Then in January of 2013, I felt compelled to tell my story and transferred everything from my journal over to a Microsoft Word document. As soon as I finished the transfer of about 20,000 words, I mailed it to Jim and Michelle Cochran, Chris Wright's parents, and asked for their approval to tell of their son's last day. With their approval, I decided to write this book. My personality is more of a doer than a teller, so I knew this was not going to be an easy journey for me, but I was determined to give it my all. I spent countless hours writing and editing. One day I listened to 6 hours of Beethoven's greatest hits and wrote 6,000 words. I was compelled to tell my story, and it eventually took over my life. As with any first-hand account, this book is from my point of view, but I made sure to account for all points of view to best articulate exactly what happened. Anyone who has been in combat knows that everyone involved in a firefight remembers certain incidents with no recollection of details from someone else's account. Even though each person involved might have a few differences because of their vantage points, all accounts tell the same story. I have spoken with everyone involved and spent hours going through each incident to describe in detail exactly what happened. Because of the attention to detail, I was advised of and followed all guidelines set out by the Army's Office of the Chief of Public Affairs during the writing, editing, and publishing of this work. I have changed many individuals' names to not reveal their identity. All call signs, missions, objectives, and operations have been changed to keep from releasing classified information. I strived for perfection and accuracy, but these stories should not be read as official AARs. After-action reports. The Ranger Regiment Public Affairs Officer reviewed this book, but neither the 75th Ranger Regiment, the U.S. Army, nor the Department of Defense officially endorse its content. This book is a living, breathing extension of me. I am proud of not only me and my brothers and how hard we fought, but also the ones that are still fighting. They have my utmost respect. To each person that hears this book, I hope you are able to learn from it, and I ask that you not forget that these are real people, and the sweat, tears, bloodshed, and lives lost are real too. Rangers lead the way. Grant McGarry. Introduction. It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs and comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows the great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat. Theodore Roosevelt, 26th President of the United States of America. After 4 years and 20 weeks of service to my country, my time was up, and I decided to close the warrior chapter of my life. I was honorably discharged from the United States Army on January 9th, 2011. During my 4 years in 2nd Platoon, Charlie Company, 1st Ranger Battalion, 75th Ranger Regiment, I met some of the finest men in the United States of America. When it was all said and done, my time as an Army Ranger in Charlie Company, 2 Charlie, was the proudest period of my life and can be summed up in 4 words. It was an honor. To close this chapter in my life, my platoon had a going-away formation behind the company operating facility, COF, and presented me with a plaque that included a picture of 2 Charlie standing on a ridge in Afghanistan. After I was presented this plaque, a friend spoke on my behalf. His few words made me more proud than any accomplishment I have ever achieved or any award I have ever received. Sergeant Cousins, as he stood in front of the platoon of about 20 Rangers, said that I was one of the top 5 Rangers he had ever served with. This speech, coming from the person that gave me my in-processing counseling when I was first assigned to 2 Charlie and one of, if not the, most respected Ranger in the platoon, had a profound impact on me. As I began to reflect on everything and anything that had happened over the past 4 years, I thought about the day I had arrived to 2 Charlie and how much I had changed since then. I thought about when I showed up that day thinking I was a man, but little did I know I was far from it. I snapped out of my momentary daydream to speak. As I stood in front of such an amazing group of men, I couldn't help but feel ashamed. I felt ashamed that I was leaving the fight and asking my brothers to go on and continue to fight without me. I had spent every waking moment with these Rangers and had laid it all on the line with them, shedding blood, sweat, and tears. Some I had known longer than others, but regardless, they were all my brothers, and I was sad to leave. Before I even finished what I had to say to the men of 2 Charlie, I was bum-rushed by a mob of privates, stripped out of my new cowboy boots, and carried off to the showers to receive my going-away plunge. It is a ritual to throw a deserving Ranger into the showers or the pond out back when he leaves his platoon and company. Although I was not upset about this, I was not about to go down without putting up a fight. I put up a decent fight for a few seconds until I was pinned to the ground. Even after being pinned, I continued to yell at the privates just because they were privates and continued to try and punch and kick them wherever possible. It was not the best fight I had ever put up, but looking back on it, I sure did enjoy the moment. After being tossed into the cold Charlie Company locker room showers, I dried off and shook a few of the privates' hands and said my goodbye. I then got into my truck and drove off of Hunter Army Airfield in Georgia for the last time. I couldn't help but shed a tear as the gate disappeared in my rearview mirror. The years that have followed have been an interesting ride, and in a selfish way I have written this book to rid what I have bottled up inside. Even more important than my own inner ambitions and goals, I have written this book to tell the story of the warrior class that makes up 2 Charlie, so that our sacrifices will not be forgotten. For those that have not fought for America, I hope this book enlightens you on the warrior experience. For those who say we should not have fought wars in Iraq or Afghanistan, I hope this book provides you a greater understanding of the purpose of these wars. It is only the chosen few that dare travel the road that leads down a warrior's path, and we warriors must continue to hold ourselves up high. To stand for something, and to not let anyone take it from you is your God-given right, and I was not scared to pick up a rifle and say, "Send me!" I feel pity for people who have no backbone to fight for what they stand for, and feel even sorrier for those who are not willing to die for what they believe in. What it boils down to is that most people in today's society just do not have the courage or intestinal fortitude to sacrifice their freedom so that others can enjoy the fruits of their blood, sweat, and tears. Of course, nobody wants to die, but once you mentally grip that you are fighting for a cause greater than your life and are willing to die for the brother standing to your right and left, life becomes that much sweeter. Yes, I was afraid at times, and think that at some moment throughout each warrior's path we are all afraid of what the outcome could be, but that does not stop a warrior from lacing up his boots and throwing a rifle over his shoulder to take the fight to the enemy without knowing his destiny. We never knew what was waiting for us in a cave hidden in a mountain or behind a closed door, and that is what made us courageous. We did not ask for anything, and we did not want handouts. We earned the right to call ourselves Army Rangers. We earned the respect of our brothers, and we earned honor through integrity and sacrifice. I remember coming home from deployment and walking off the C-17, smelling America the Beautiful and thinking how amazing it was to see the scenery of Savannah, Georgia. These are the little things in life that the ones who have not fought for it take for granted, and only the 1% that volunteered to defend it can appreciate. Back in the saddle. Lick 'em tomorrow. Ulysses S. Grant, 18th President of the United States of America and Commanding General of the Union Army. Beginning on the night after the memorial, our squad trained every night behind our hooch in an open gravel field. We went over react-to-contact drills, fire commands, close-quarters combat tactics, and many other drills with Blaze and Sesh. We thought it best to keep our minds right by training, and after losing 2 tried and tested brothers, we wanted to make sure Blaze and Sesh were good to go for what was coming their way. Blaze and Sesh were the newest guys in the squad and the platoon, and each day they stepped up to the plate without missing a beat. They impressed their chain of command all the way to the top. Blaze and Sesh bettered themselves because they knew that they soon would have their opportunity. It was a different feeling to not have Wright and Gronbeck hanging around the hooch, a very quiet and ominous feeling. It was so off-putting that we rearranged the room to give it a new appearance. In addition to Wright, Wyatt, Plagg, and Gronbeck's absences, Staff Sergeant Cousins also had to go home to be with his wife, who was expecting a baby any day. To add fuel to the fire, Staff Sergeant Cousins' Alpha team leader was sick with malaria. In a matter of a few days, we went from having years and years of experience to being very slim with experience. We were running thin. A few days had passed since Wright's memorial, and things seemed to be slow, but just as I thought there was nothing going on, we got word of a mission. Objective Blackbeard was a single-target building, and word was there was the potential for a firefight. This was music to our ears because we wanted nothing short of a firefight. Rooster, Escobar, and I were looking for more than revenge. We were bloodthirsty. I was excited about the new mission, but when I started to get all of my mission essential gear ready, I had an onset rush of nervous and anxious energy. I tried to brush off the response, but as I went through what was expected of me tonight to try and take my mind off of the nervous feeling, I couldn't help but notice how real the reaction was. The feeling was like a punch in the gut, and the sensation was almost visceral. It was the feeling of no longer being invincible. Preparing for this mission was a lot different than all the previous missions I had been on. There was a more sobering feeling in the air. There was not as much small talk, no joking around amongst us buddies, and there was definitely no laughing. As I finished connecting my battery to my MBITR, multiband internal team radio, I began to put it back into my radio pouch on my kit and noticed how Escobar was taking the time to make sure Blaze was good to go. Escobar was a great leader, and he truly took the time to take care of the boys. Our squad had a great working relationship that complemented all of our personalities. After Escobar finished helping Blaze, I mentioned in passing to Escobar that I was feeling nervous and anxious. I am not sure if I was the only one having the feeling of no longer being invincible, but I can almost guarantee that he had his own thoughts that he was dealing with prior to this mission. More and more guys were coming into the ready room, and the volume of noise from conversation started to rise, and slowly the unsettled vibe in the room began to vanish. I finished checking all my gear and batteries and sprayed some CLP into the bolt-carrying group of my M4 and charged it a few times. After making sure my M4 was good to go, I closed the dust cover and hung it back up in my locker and headed to the talk to link up with Rooster. He had a look on his face that can be best defined as stoic and confident. We had a small conversation in which he divulged as much as he knew about tonight's mission, and then we headed over to the SEALs AO for the mission brief. The intel for the mission set the tone. Objective Blackbeard was a lone house with a few surrounding homes. This target was in the farmlands of Afghanistan, basically out in the middle of nowhere. There was reported movement throughout the day with armed men in and around the house. Weapons had been positively identified via ISR, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance footage. Following a quick brief from the SEAL platoon sergeant, we headed out to the flight line once again like we had done so many times prior. After the short bus ride out to the airfield, we had to pause for a moment, take a knee, and let the crew chief and the Chinook personnel finish the aircraft PMCS, Preventive Maintenance Checks and Services. As we waited, Rooster and I chatted on the tarmac about how loading up on a helicopter in the middle of a night with a ton of ammo and explosives and seeing your brothers to your right and left was our favorite part of the job. Nothing was cooler than this in my mind. Once the crew was done servicing the Chinook, he waved us on board. The small talk stopped, and we flipped that switch, put our night vision goggles down, and went to work. After about a 30-minute ride, we were dropped off, and the normal routine of taking a quick piss before we stepped off commenced as usual. As I took a knee, I could see tracer rounds behind a mountain range popping off and streaking through the air as if they were shooting stars. I finished my business and checked out my wrist Garmin to make sure the satellites were linking up so that the infill route would load. At about the time my route loaded in my Garmin, the Joint Assault Force started the movement to the objective building. The movement was at a good pace, and as we came to the ridgeline that looked down on the target, Weapons Squad positioned themselves up on the ridge in a support by fire line, providing overwatch of the target rooftop and the surrounding areas. Weapons Squad had open-bolt, fully automatic machine guns nestled into a fortified fighting position, and the gunners were like carnivores, ready to chew up flesh. As the assault force took a half-moon approach into the valley where the target building sat nestled into the side of the mountain, I peered down on the target area to get a good frame of reference to features of and around the target. We walked down a rocky, mountainous cliff as quietly as possible, making sure to carefully and precisely place each step as we descended. Once we navigated through the ravine and were down on the valley floor, we started to spread out and cover more area, with the intent to get more muzzles aimed toward the target building. There were a few trees between us and the target building, which was about 100 meters away, so we didn't have a clear view of the target building yet. As we picked up the pace and headed straight towards the X, I thought I saw a something run between the shadows of the trees. I quickly fixed my infrared laser in the direction of travel the potential person would appear. Before I could locate anyone or anything, I heard pop shots from what sounded like an AK-47. It was definitely not an open-bolt weapon, and it was not suppressed, so it had to be an insurgent. Weapons Squad was taking fire, and what was a brisk walking pace turned into an all-out 50-yard dash toward the target building at full speed. Rooster and I were running as fast as we could, jumping from one farm field down to the other and hurtling over small tributaries of water and sink mud. As we were sprinting, the AK-47 fire was picking up, and it sounded like there were multiple combatants engaging with AKs. Specialist Dave Wilkie, one of the gunners on the ridgeline, remembers hearing his squad leader say, "We are taking fire," as rounds were popping over their heads and all around them. Wilkie began to scan the rooftop and then saw an armed insurgent running on the rooftop. Wilkie quickly acquired the insurgent and opened up on him at a cyclic rate of fire, stopping him dead in his tracks. The sound of the open-bolt weapon and the sight of the tracer rounds rip through the sky and leave a trail of green fire until burning out was like watching a 4th of July firework display. Except better. Rooster and I were off to the races, closing the gap, spreading out, and creating a wall searching for armed insurgents. As we were sprinting, hurdling, and jumping at speeds that would rival an NFL running back on Sunday afternoon, we spotted insurgents maneuvering around the target building, and one was running away from the target building. Rooster and I, at full sprint, started engaging an insurgent, and the SEAL team to our left began engaging the other insurgent. I could hear Rooster's M4 release round after round, and I am sure they were passing only a few feet from the back of my head. He was only a few feet behind me and offset to my right. Then, all of a sudden, as I had my laser aimed in on an insurgent preparing to take a shot, I went head over tea kettle into a muddy mess. The 25-foot flat farm patty ended, and I fell about a foot straight into the wet and muddy ravine. My left shoulder and my face went straight into the wet soil. I quickly tried to brush my gear off and regain my composure, getting up as if nothing happened. Rule number 1, always look cool. I could hear Rooster laughing as he jumped down and landed on his 2 feet. I was determined to beat him to the kill and started sprinting back into the fight. I was no longer leading the way on this charge, but once I caught back up with Rooster, we took a knee at the end of the farm field that we were currently on, turned on our lasers, and started engaging the combatant. We dropped him in his tracks with precision-fired shots. Despite knowing that he was dead, which was obvious due to how he crumbled to the ground, we continued to engage. Escobar and Blaze showed up. They didn't hesitate to join the party. We would later positively identify one round went straight through the back of the insurgent's head, splitting the top portion of his skull in half, revealing bloody brain matter and leaving what skin was left flapping over his face. Parts of the skin left with hair was covering parts of his head, as if it were some kind of comb-over hairstyle. The second gunshot was straight through his chest. We quickly separated, and Rooster and I moved toward the left side of the field, while Escobar and Blaze covered the right sector. The 4 of us had interlocking sectors of fire, and we were scanning for targets. We were getting radio calls from ISR that there were movers still in the woodline that the armed insurgent we killed had been making a run for. A fire mission was being prepped. ISR flexed over and started shining down pulsating infrared flashes 25 feet in front of us in a patch of trees and brush. Immediately following, there was an infrared sparkle about 50 meters off to our 11 o'clock in the tall grass that stood about 4 feet tall. Radio traffic confirmed that the ISR platform had eyes on 2 armed insurgents, marked by the pulsating infrared beam streaming directly in front of Rooster and me from the aircraft. Rooster and I didn't hesitate, and dumped the rest of the ammo in our mag, inserted a new one, and continued to engage into the small wooded area being marked by the pulsating sparkle. While we were engaging these 2 combatants, a ranger from another squad sent a 40mm HEDP, high-explosive dual-purpose, round that landed and exploded directly on the ISR beam, illuminating the armed insurgent taking cover in the tall grass. After complete domination of this target and the immediate surrounding areas, we pulled back and the 4 of us laid down in a dried-up portion of the ravine that I had fallen in earlier and took cover. The fast movers were en route, and they were dropping a 1,000-pound JDAM, Joint Direct Action Munition. With a precision-guided munition set to impact directly into the insurgents in the woodline approximately 100 meters away, we quickly laid down on our bellies and waited for the grand finale of the fireworks show. We started to joke and small talk. The feeling of being invincible was back, and we were having a blast. Then I could feel the ground beneath me rumble, and I was moved by the force created by the bomb, which left behind a 15-foot deep and 20-foot wide crater and one destroyed woodline that looked like a tornado ripped through, destroying everything. Hostage rescue. Treat your men as you would your own beloved sons, and they will follow you into the deepest valley. Sun Tzu, The Art of War. All missions ceased when a woman named Linda Norgrove was captured on September 26, 2010. Immediately following news of her capture by Taliban insurgents, all assets were utilized in an effort to rescue her from the insurgents holding her captive. Intel reports stated that Linda Norgrove was a British aid worker working for other government agencies, and while driving on a main highway in the Kunar Province from Jalalabad to Asadabad in the Duagal Valley in 2 unarmored, unmarked vehicles, Norgrove, along with 3 Afghanistan colleagues, were ambushed. In an attempt to rescue Norgrove, a company from the 101st Airborne Division, assisted by elements from the Afghan Army and Afghan police, began a house-to-house search. The joint element also set up roadblocks posted at the Duagal Valley entrance to prevent Norgrove's captors from being able to take her eastward into Pakistan. The rugged and mountainous terrain made the search difficult. However, the task force contained the Taliban insurgents and Linda Norgrove. Immediately following the containment, we were given the order through the ranks to rescue Norgrove, starting all the way at the top. British Prime Minister Cameron and William Hague gave the initial green light, which was funneled all the way down to our task force in Jalalabad. It was go time. The SEALs were the main effort, and 2 Charlie brought to the fight 2 line squads to provide security via blocking positions. The intent of the blocking positions for this operation was to keep insurgents from coming or going into the target area, allowing the SEALs to focus on making a successful rescue. This mission was a time-sensitive target, so we had a hasty quick brief, and GRGs, ground reference graphic, were passed out as usual so that we could all have a reference of the target area and its surroundings. I quickly glanced at my GRG and checked out the location where we would be setting up our blocking position, the target building, and the terrain in relation to where we were and where the target building was located. With the urgency to rescue Linda Norgrove compounded by the rugged terrain, a 15 to 20-foot fast rope right into the middle of the small village was the best method of infiltration. Conveniently, 2nd Squad's blocking position was only 20 feet from where the Chinook was planned to insert us. This would make for an easy sprint to get where we needed to be once our boots hit the ground. Our method of infiltration for the task force out of the Jalalabad airfield was 2 Chinook helicopters. The Rangers selected to secure the blocking position with 2nd Squad included me, Staff Sergeant Rooster, our platoon sergeant, Escobar, Smitty, and Blaze. After the brief, we all loaded up on our respective buses and were driven out to the flight line. It is always a quiet ride when on the drive out to the flight line. Each warrior went over last-minute checks on their weapons, radios, and gear. On this specific mission, Escobar was not only going over his own equipment, but was also triple-checking Blaze to make sure he was good to go. Blaze was the newest and youngest ranger going out on the mission, and Escobar was looking after him. I always had a certain sequence of events that took place prior to loading up on the helicopter, and once my routine was completed, an internal switch flipped inside me, making me feel invincible. After the short ride, I stepped off the bus and was accompanied by a joint task force of American Jedis, and we walked like the giants we were. As I flipped down my night vision goggles and entered a world scene in a green tent, I charged around into the chamber of my M4, gave a quick slap to the forward assist with the palm of my hand to make sure my round was properly seated, and then closed my dust cover. I then drew my Beretta M9 and charged around into the chamber of my secondary weapon. I gently pulled the slide back and shined a white light to see the brass of a 9mm casing glisten in the light, confirming I had a round in the chamber. I quickly holstered my sidearm and turned around from the cement barrier I had my muzzle pointed at while loading my weapons, and then headed for my chalk, which was lining up to board the Chinook. I took a deep breath of JP-8 exhaust coming out of the massive Chinook that was taking us into battle. Smelling the jet fuel and hearing the loud noise of the spinning above and watching the Chinook vibrate on the tarmac got my blood flowing every time. I started to come alive. After the chalk leader waved us forward, we started to walk onto the aircraft and load up. Blaze sat in front of me, and Escobar, Smitty, and Rooster were in front leading the way, which is customary for team cohesiveness. As we all got situated and comfortable, the Chinook started to pull off the ground and we quickly ascended, banking toward the objective. The Jalalabad airfield lights disappear into the night. As we were en route, I looked around at the guys and noticed everyone was doing the same thing. We were all going over the plan. After going over the plan one last time, I then reminded myself to focus on the task at hand and everything else will work itself out. Over the radio, our platoon sergeant said, "1 minute!" I immediately looked at Blaze and raised my right index finger, letting him know ropes were dropping in 1 minute. He made eye-to-eye contact with me, letting me know he was good to go. Then the rope master motioned a 30-second call to the entire chalk. No one had to say anything. We all placed our hands on our safety line, a piece of bungee cord connected to our rigger's belt via a metal clasp, snap link that had us hooked into the bird. Immediately following the 30-second call, the crew chief rope master looked at the chalk and said, "Ropes, ropes, ropes!" He then did an about-face, turned around, and released the fast ropes by pulling the pin that secured the coiled rope dangling in the air at the aft of the Chinook. It didn't take more than a few seconds for him to confirm the rope was successfully deployed by looking down at the ground through his night vision. As guys started exiting the aircraft, I followed suit and traced the skin of the aircraft with my left hand. Through my night vision, I could start to see the top of the rope hanging as I got closer to the tail of the aircraft. I walked forward, watching one guy after another slide down the rope. After Blaze slid down the rope like a firefighter, it was finally my turn. I reached out and grabbed the rope with my right hand and then pulled my left hand from the skin of the aircraft, gripped the rope, and in sequence brought my feet out, turned, and slid down at a controlled descent, all the while looking down at Blaze a few feet beneath me through my night vision. As I slid down the rope, I felt the notches of the rope vibrate as they passed through the leather of the gloves, protecting my hands from burning. Although the gloves protected my hands, I could feel the heat as the leather began to soften.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?